What is up, MFers, and welcome to the garage, and welcome to the month of October.
There we go.
Oh, yeah! Boom!
Look at that fish.
October is an exciting month for me because I've caught some of the biggest bass of my life in October. We've made it through some of the worst months of the year for fishing, in my opinion, which are September, even August can be super tough months. October is where things finally start to come around a little bit for bass fishing, and in today's video I'm going to show you a handful of my presentations, locations, and how you should approach these areas to go out and not only catch more fish, better quality fish, but the biggest bass of your life on some of these techniques at your body of water. All right, October is an exciting time of the year. It can still be difficult to catch fish, but once you land on them, you can really pattern them well, and you can catch them on, some big baits. I got these giant swim baits laying all around me right here. I'm excited to show you guys how I approach this month. It's maybe my favorite big bait month of the year, but we also got tiny little itty bitty baits. Look at the size difference in that, and you can catch equally as big and as many fish on this little guy as you can on this a lot of times. So I'm excited to tell you. I'm also excited, before we get into the baits, about this new merch we got. You guys might notice we got the Been Getting Any hats and shirts on the website. We also got these badass new 402 black and red shirt designs. You know what the Been Getting Any is about, right? Zark's been saying that forever. You pull up to a random stranger on the bank in a kayak, you're out fishing with your buddy, or even better, you pull up to a super serious pro in a sparkly boat, and the first thing you gotta say is, "You been getting any?" It just kind of became a joke and stuck, so we got the Been Getting Any hats and shirts. Check them out, I'll link them down below. Support the channel, it'll help me make more videos like this for you guys. Okay, let's jump into the baits, and more importantly, let's talk about where the fish are at right now in October and throughout the month of October. And I don't know if I'm gonna talk about the best 3 baits, the best 5 baits, the best 27 baits, because we're not really gonna focus as much on the bait as much as we need to focus on the type of cover and the attitude and why the bass are in certain areas that they're at in this crazy month. Now obviously I'm down in Texas, I'm in southeast Texas, and we barely even have seasons here, Florida, southern parts of the country, way far south. And so I'm gonna try to make this video, more applicable to the entire country and what I've seen as I travel around. Really, a bass is a simple creature. It's only thinking about 2 different things. It's thinking about boning, right? But that's only for like 1 to 2 months of the entire year. October is not one of those months. The rest of the time it's thinking about feeding, and of course surviving as well, but mostly feeding. How is it gonna get its next meal? And so when we start to think about where a bass is gonna need to feed, of course the most important thing for the month of October, and especially any of these transition months, is where are the bait fish going to be? Once you establish what the bait fish are in your body of water, then we really need to track those. The anglers that are the best on tour all year round are the guys that are very in tune with the forage. They don't have some special secret bait or some special, code on live scope to catch fish better than everyone else. They stay on top of the bait fish, and that allows them to stay on top of not only bass, but the biggest bass in their body of water. September, we got out of the period where it's like the start of that fall transition. It's where we still have those hot days, but then it starts to get cooler nights. A lot of times the lake can turn over where that hot layer of water and the cool layer of water underneath flip-flops, the water conditions all change, you get all f***ed up for a couple days and you just got issues. Well, October, things have started to settle down a little bit more. The water is kind of gradually cooling, and so what does that do to bait fish? The bait fish are going to start to move around more in the month of October, and I'm not a shadologist, right? So I'm not gonna tell you that they're gonna specifically do this on this body of water, because it can be a little bit different. But what I have noticed is the shad, whether that be gizzard or threadfin shad, are gonna make some movements. And when they make some movements, those biggest bass, the smartest bass in your body of water, are going to intercept them. So are all the other predator fish, the crappie, 10-inch, 12-inch, even bigger crappie, a 10-pound bass, a bigger bass, even a 6-7 pound bass is going to be munching those crappie as well. And those are gonna be eating the same little threadfin shad that some of these bass are gonna be going after. So we need to stay in tune with all of that. Now, when we start to look at a lake map, like a natural, a highland body of water, or even just any type of man-made lake that's dammed off, that's got longer creek arms, and we can start thinking about some areas where the bass are gonna pick these big shad off. And then let's talk about the baits I use to approach those areas. Let's talk about a lake that has a lot of docks. Then we can talk about a lake that maybe has a lot of grass. And then let's talk about a lake that maybe is just a rock or a wood style body of water. But first and foremost, a lake, let's talk about like a highland lake with docks. So what I'm looking for in the month of October is isolated, big, on the way in, on the way out of any type of creek. Because these shad, like I said, it can vary completely. If you're on a giant body of water like an Ozarks, a Table Rock, somewhere like that, what's happening in one section of the lake, it can be totally different, 30 miles up. So what I like to focus on is finding these docks that are at the mouths of some of the major creeks or on secondary points. Most importantly, the docks that are very, very isolated in these areas. I think that's a thing that if you watch my tip videos, if you watch my seasonal patterns for the best baits for the best months, you're gonna hear that word over and over and over, and that is isolated. Especially when fish and bait fish are transitioning, they like to stop on specific areas and wait for that conveyor belt of those shad to come by their face. Whether they're working their way to the back of the creek, whether they're working their way in, out, whatever direction, they wanna be on the piece of cover that is going to be the first piece of cover, the biggest piece of cover, and especially the most isolated piece of cover. So if you're working down a lake that's got a bunch of docks, I'm gonna go ahead and focus a lot of time on that very first dock that's heading into the cove. If there's a big row of docks, I'm gonna find the dock that sticks out the furthest. I'm gonna go all the way to the back as well, and I'm gonna look for the spot where the creek, might wind around a little bit, and then in the back, where the creek channel goes adjacent to a flat. Bass can get on these flats. Shad like to really be on these flats a lot of times at the back of creeks during different times of the day. But when a creek channel is winding, meandering its way back, one of my favorite areas is to catch these big bass is if you can find where it's meandering and then it gets all the way to the back where it's probably the safest place that a bass could be, where it's not too shallow. And trust me, they can get like in a foot of water on some of these docks sometimes, where that creek channel butts up and it's hitting a super shallow flat that comes up maybe on a point. There's a dock, there's just one dock sitting right there. Absolutely money. Of course, if you can get some brush piles or something on that dock, that's gold, and that's what you guys want to target right there. So as far as baits to target these isolated docks, these first docks going into creeks, docks that stick out from the others, docks on points, my first thing I want to throw at them without question is going to be a big swim bait. And this is a 6-cent draw, and the regular size, this is that smaller size draw. The smaller one has tighter twitching motion. The big one kind of has a long motion. It glides out a little bit wider. Both are great options, and I really like this color right here. This is one of the brand new colors we came out with. This thing freaking glows down there in that more stained water. And October is the time of the year when you have a lot of that more stained water. So if you have, a foot to a foot and a half, 2 foot visibility, this guy's gonna be killer. And I don't like to let these fish, take a look at this bait too much. I like to freaking work it, chop it, glide it, run this thing into the side of the dock, really hard, sharp twitching motions, working it out, because they're used to seeing the real thing over and over and over. You wanna just, not let them get too good a look at the bait, but these bigger baits that you can work and glide up underneath some of those floating docks and in and out of some of those docks that have the standing poles on them. This is about a good way as you can get to catch giant fish. And I mean, a lot of these highland lakes with northern strain bass in them, you're gonna catch a lot of 1 to 2 pounders on this bait as well. And most importantly, you're gonna catch a little bit better average size fish than your competitors or your buddies. Who doesn't wanna go out fish all their buddies and be like, I caught him on a 10-inch bait. What were you doing? Throwing a shaky head all day? Yeah, sounds fun, bud. But yeah, this is my favorite way to target those docks. I've won money doing this, and seriously, like, I've caught some of the biggest bass in my life targeting these types of isolated areas. Now, obviously, there's other ways to target these docks as well. Probably my favorite way to target them and get a better quality bite is with the jig right here. I mean, you can see this is a 1/2 ounce jig. It's a little hybrid jig that I tied up and I made super, super compact. Skips super well. That's that Congo craw right there on the back of it. What an awesome little jig trailer that is. It's the hybrid jig, which means it's a hybrid head design. So it skips really, really well. but you can also throw this thing up north. You can throw it in grass, rock piles, stuff like that. I like a flapping style trailer a lot of times. Some days if you have like really high conditions, no clouds, no wind, that's going to be a time when a beaver style trailer works really good, like a prawn. But I like a flapping style trailer. And one thing I didn't really touch on that can be very, very important to pattern these fish and really position these fish on docks to make it higher percentage is wind. If you get a lower light day or a day when it's really a lot of wind blowing in, especially if you have cleaner water lakes and the wind's blowing in, target that wind blown side with the swim bait, and try to find the areas where, if you're targeting the first dock coming into a creek, target areas where the wind's blowing into the front of the dock, where it's like the first spot for the pull up, and you're gonna catch fish. I promise you guys that. Super, super high percentage area. The great thing about a jig, you can skip it up under those docks, of course. You can put it places that you can't put a glide bait. A glide bait's pretty much, you're only gonna be able to throw it down the sides, down the front, maybe flip it up underneath the walkway or something like that. The jig, you can skip it in between. Any type of floating structures, of course, into the shore stations, back behind, up underneath the walkways, some of the higher percentage areas, up underneath some of the cables. Very, very good bait for really putting it in tough places, which is why I like the compact jig as well. Let's have some fun. Let's talk about grass fisheries now. And this is what's happening at some of the bigger bodies of water like Rayburn and Toledo right now. Look at that big sexy bastard right there. That's one of my favorite ways to target these grass lakes right now. A lot of times this time of year, there's a lot of little tiny threadfin bait still in all these bodies of water, it seems like. Even though the spawn might have happened 4 or 5 months ago, there's still a lot of bait fish that are under 2 inches in length, which is not the size of this Magnum catwalk as well. But this Magnum catwalk is a way that I like to start off by targeting some of these grass edges. And really, when we're talking about the key areas that bass can pull up on grass edges or over the top of grass, is going to be the same type of stuff. We're going to be looking for islands that have grass around them. We're looking for some of the biggest points leading into some of the back of these creeks, and exactly the same thing with the channel swing. If you have a channel swing that's meandering around and it is going straight up into a rounded point that's got grass on the grass edge, those are going to be some of the highest percentage grass edges. And to me, if you have a bait like this one right here, this Magnum catwalk that's going to throw a ton of water, very noisy, throw a ton of flash in this Royal Chrome color, I believe it's called, is going to be a really good bait this time of year, is that big topwater walking bait. It's been the case for years. Guys have been catching giant fish on grass edges over the top of some of that submergent, whether that be hydrilla, milfoil, stuff like that. Big walking bait is absolutely key in October. Now, another bait that really gets overlooked by a lot of guys, and this is a bait where if you're starting to see, especially in low light periods, big balls of threadfin shad, you'll see them dimple on the surface, or if you have forward facing, you'll see them on the forward facing, working some of the edges. Those bait fish will move up in lower light periods or windy periods of the day, and they'll get around those grass edges. That can be a time those bass really ambush them. They push them back from some of those creek channels and drains up against that edge. Very, very sneaky bait to throw in that situation is this lipless crankbait. This is that 6 cents Duke, small size. I think it's a 55 size is what it's called. This bait is an absolute freaking killer. It's the exact same size as a lot of those threadfin shad. And this is a bait where you can cover a lot of water with. You can find fish active really, really quick. A lot of guys have gotten so reliant on the chatterbait. Of course, the chatterbait catches them in the exact same situation as well. But this bait can be a little bit, a little bit sneakier. It can be a way to get more bites from those fish that are conditioned to a chatterbait, a swim jig, a swim bait. This is the 6 cents Duke. Little bit tighter wiggle than some of the other lipless crankbaits we have, like the Quake. It fishes really, really well up high in the column, over the top of some of the grass edges. And I like to throw it, I keep things pretty simple. I'll throw a gold color, and I'll throw this little natural see-through type color in the fall. Some days they want one more than the other. Kind of like in the spring, how some days they want red, some days they want gold, whatever. Same thing with these guys. Mix it up and see which one works best. Another bait that has always been really popular on some of these bodies of water down here in Texas, and really it's spread throughout the country. I know Gunnersville and the Tennessee River chain lakes, the areas that have a lot of good grass, especially those with water clarity, is this style of bait, the multi-jointed Swimbait. And this is the trace, this is the 6-inch trace. And you guys notice I haven't thrown this bait a whole lot on my channel, and that's because generally I like a bigger size bait when I'm throwing a multi-jointed. I think I have one down here. Here it is. But usually I like a little bit bigger bait, just a little bit bigger draw, because some of the gizzards these bass are ambushing and eating on these same exact grassline areas, islands, big main lake points, secondary points, you know, adjacent to flat points, adjacent to some of those creek channels. They're eating the big shad. Well, we actually just came out with this guy right here, the 7¼ inch size of the trace. And I mean, this isn't like a massive bait. Like, I catch fish all the time on this KGB king shad, and like, look how much smaller it is than that bait. It's not a really super difficult, you know, bait to go out and throw. I throw it on my 7/7 Milliken rod, that heavy one, the same one that I flip with, the same one I throw a big spoon with. Throw, you know, line through with that rod too. This bait is so lifelike in the water. The kicking action's awesome. As opposed to some like the bull shad and baits like that, there's going to be a lot better variety of colors. You got see-through colors, you got chrome colors you can throw in this bait, and it's the same type of deal for me. I'll just do a steady, quick, fast retrieve, 7-speed reel, and you can kind of let the fish tell you. A lot of times you'll feel them nip it and kind of just bite at the back like they do with the swim jig or chatterbait sometimes, and that's when I'll start to mix in some stop and go on the retrieve. And you can weight these things, you can foam the top of them, you can do a little bit of whatever you want to get them to suspend, to stop in the water column just right. And some days they even want it up on the surface, burning, just waking this bait on some of the days where you have a gap over the top of the water, over the top of the grass, sorry about that. And there's that little submergent edge right there those bigger bass like to ambush over the top of sometimes, or days when it's really, really calm and they just need something under the surface that is a little bit more natural than a big clacking topwater. I mean, look at that. Magnum Catwalk's about the same size. It's not a very much bigger bait really than that even. And you guys saw what this guy does. It gets bit by 1-pounders just as well as it does by giant ones. So I promise you, multi-jointed bait is going to be a very, very effective bait over the next month and a half or so, especially in areas where you got fish that are, you know, 5+ pounders. They love this thing. So the final body of water we're going to talk about that I love in October is another, you know, more of a highland style body of water, or a lake that's got a lot of the big isolated rock. Once again, I mean, I'm just like a broken record here. We're going to keep talking about the biggest, the most isolated, the most unique, the most windblown areas. Those are all going to be the best parts, the best pieces of cover when you talk about rock on the bank. And the ways that I like to really cover a lot of water, like to find those areas, you know, I love throwing a top water this time of year. First and foremost, you know, a buzz bait is absolutely killer for covering water, making a lot of noise, and most importantly, getting a big bite. So where a rock transition occurs, where the biggest rock is on a secondary point, and again, when there's a wind-blown bank, not too hard, of course, but, you know, 1-foot chop blown in somewhere, just a ripple, a buzzbait's really tough to beat. There's a lot of good buzzbaits on the market. Some of my favorites, the Crocagator, Picasso's got a good buzzbait that's really, really squeaky. And then of course Teckle came out with this one too. It's kind of a remake of the old Squeaky Dolphin. That's it's been a good bait for me so far really this season. But all these baits I like to throw very simply this 6-cents trailer on the back. That's the stroker craw. You know, it's a crawdad bait, of course, so who would think a crawdad on the surface, but really it's just going to kick a lot. It's flat on the bottom, so it skips really well, and these flappers in the back have a lot of drag, so you can actually pull this bait, keep it on the surface, keep in the strike zone longer. And this is a good bait too for those grass line type areas, but throwing this bait up parallel even to a 45-degree angle at some of those wind-blown big chunky rocks is absolutely killer. And I can't go any further without, you know, saying these baits right here are also effective. If you're not getting to go on the buzz bait, a big glide or a multi-jointed bait are absolutely key. Those big gizzard shad are going to be a lot of times moving, you know, in packs of 2 to 10, and these guys imitate those perfectly, and the bass like to sit on those bigger, more isolated rocks and really ambush big baits. These guys are absolutely perfect. And so it's the same type of deal as with the dock. I like to keep it, maybe the glide, a little bit more, I don't know, more methodical, a little bit of a moderate speed retrieve when you're using this bigger, wider glider. And then it's going to be the same type of deal with this. Make contact with the rock, I guess, is a huge key for me when I'm throwing a multi-jointed bait around any type of hard cover. Bounce this thing, run this thing's head into some of that rock, because if you watch those big gizzard shad, they're constant. I don't know if they're eating algae or what they're doing as they're going back. Their heads are constantly down, but this is a very realistic looking bait. It is not nearly as realistic as the real thing. So you need to make some contact. Think like a square bill in that situation, but make contact with the rocks, you know, burn it up to a big rock and then stop it right when it gets to the other side of it, stuff like that. And a lot of this is going to be visually seeing these rocks, whether they be underwater or if you can just see, you know, a bank that's getting a little bit steeper and has some big chunk rock coming off the side of it. You know there's going to be some more of that down in the water column. You're fishing 5 feet or less when you're throwing any of these techniques up on those rocks, and it's a great place where a bass will spend the majority of their time, majority of their day down in 20, 30, 80 feet of water, and they can slide up in the shade, in the sun, whether it be, you know, depending on where they want to hide that day, and sit there and ambush big baits like these right here. That was fun. Let me know in the comments section, drop a comment, and let me know what tip you liked the most, what bait you're gonna go out and really try to work on. This is a great time of the year because I can try a lot of different baits and presentations to kind of practice, get sharper, and really experiment so I can share things with you guys. I actually have another tip video coming here soon, a technique that I just kind of started to scratch the surface on. I've already caught some giant fish on it, so it's a great time for us all to learn. And of course, if you want to support the channel, I'd love if you'd pick up a Been Getting Any hat or shirt or one of these new badass 402 black or red shirts as well. Oh, and these, we got some awesome new colors of the draw. You guys saw, this is, I think, Chrome Gizzard, and then this is Live. What is it? Live Shad? No, that's what that was. I just pulled them out of the box because I just got these guys. Live Gizzard Flash. Look at that photo finish Gizzard Shad color with some chrome and flash to it. I got that. All right, I'm out for Kitchen. I'm out here. Peace.
I'm not sorry. I can't help this.